particularly to do with ICT and partnership development.
Yeah.
I'd like to, I think, explore essentially not just the role of ICT, which everybody is aware of, and we know there's a lot said about the different things that apply within an ICT environment, but the rapid globalization that ICT has contributed to allows us a very unique opportunity to actually see how it affects us and how we could effect, particularly partnerships, as this particular session particularly demands, in the case of our situation, which we talk about as the context, again, using jargon as the knowledge-based economy. But my essential interest is to look at how ICT can promote the societal side of development, which is engaging communities, assessing impact which comes to agriculture, education, as you mentioned, economic growth, and particularly healthcare, which is also something that everybody's talked about. Notwithstanding, of course, the implications to cybercrime, which I'm not going to indulge into Ralph's territory because I know nothing about law. On a good day, I could spell it as a three-letter word. So, but I think if you look at collaborations and partnerships and accessibility, one of the things that appears quite fundamentally is, I think, it's about the efficiency of the system, the reliability of the system, the affordability of the system, and particularly the safety in light of users. And I think that is, to me, the impact which is perhaps creating some of the challenges. The other challenge, of course, that comes from is the resilience of the ICT system itself. And I believe that's where partnerships could be explored. Resilience comes from sharing evidence. Resilience comes from a partner's capability. And I believe India is pretty much juxtaposed in light of how it uses technology to an advantage. The Aadhaar card, for example, which all of us carry as nationals in this country, has provided a unique opportunity for that linkage. And I think across Uganda, perhaps, I've seen it in Kenya, there is a desire to do things like that. In the West, for example, the driver's license is the identity. And post-World War, generally in the United States, an identity card is perceived to be a state-controlled kind of thing. And so, nobody would want you to carry, quote-unquote, a national card other than a voluntary passport. And so there are some challenges within a societal sense to carry an identity card. And in India, it seems like people have accepted that and they use it quite usefully. And that, I think, is important. But what happens with linkage is important. India is probably one of the most prosperous countries over the last 20 years, I believe. But fundamentally, there are challenges. The challenges, of course, is very few people in this country pay taxes. And that, I think, is one of the bigger benefits that might accrue to that. And government's, if you like, ability to rationalize and the system of taxation, has to be applauded, because it will provide the common citizen to appreciate the value of paying tax, perhaps. And I think the Aadhaar card is perhaps playing that card. And the Aadhaar card simply is a support card that everybody carries, for those of you. It's almost a social security-like card, if you like. But the question is, how can we use the experience and facilitate the scenarios that come out of that? And for that, I speak as an academic. Data analytics is something that we need to perhaps address. And research data is very critical. And that, I think, is also something that we must entertain and appreciate. The other thing, of course, is the focus on who provides that information. You'll be amazed that none of the large companies that we find today, the Googles of the world, the Yahoos of the world, the Microsofts of the world, were this large when they started off. They were small and medium enterprises. They became big because of their ability to develop and rationalize the sorts of things that they've done, which have made them some really big enterprises. I believe there are operations in India. There's the likes of Infosys, the likes of Wipro, and others, and I know the likes of Safaricom, I believe, and MTN, and all these other large companies, where these partnerships are quite evident. But I believe that partnerships are happening between small and medium enterprises that would then make them bigger enterprises as joint ventures, perhaps, and I think that is critical. The other thing I said to you in a societal sense, how can we talk about urban development and take that to rural renewal? And that's very critical. People in rural areas are not just dogged by their inability to switch on power or switch on a well pump. They need more support than that. And I believe infrastructure support is critical in allowing ourselves that opportunity to do that, and that is where education comes into the picture. And education and urban renewal go together. But rural revival and education somehow there seems to be a distinction. And I believe that is where it comes into the picture. Again, I wear my educator's hat, and that I think is something that is important as well. But more importantly, I believe here is an opportunity for us to collaborate between urban renewal and, if you may, rural revival. And that, I believe, is through transferring skill. And this transferability is critical because transferability allows us the essential opportunity to engage. And I believe countries in Africa, states in India perhaps would take that responsibility to effectively do. Because here's a real classic example. In the last 10 years, the context of engagement in Africa is amazing with mobile telephone. We've all heard of M-Pesa. Paytm is a child of M-Pesa, which is used widely in India. Nobody set out to do this collaboration. It just happened. Because it's a system that worked. It's a system that played itself out in its life cycle and developed this opportunity. And this is, I believe, a natural transition. And it happens all the time, whether you like it or you don't. And to me, that natural transition has to happen. And I believe the impregnation, if you like, or the spread, if you like, of mobile technology has allowed us to do that. Because if you look at some of the interesting scenarios, that individuals using the internet, its growth is exponential. How do you actually take that? So let me give you an example, because figures make sense. There are 830 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. Colleagues from Africa probably might be able to correct me with that figure, but that's roughly the figure that I've got from the UN. Thank you. They have, of course, seen strong economic growth, as rightly pointed out by colleagues from Uganda. 7% is not something to shake a fist at. That is huge. Sadly, it's been ignored over many years. The other thing, of course, is political stability. I'm selling Africa now. And of course, it's the global commodity boom that has taken over. I will give you a very personal example. I travel to Kenya quite often. My colleagues don't. I had the opportunity to take them to Nairobi and take them into a region of Nairobi which is absolutely amazing on the near west side. We had driven in at night. When they woke up the next day, the phone rang and they said, "Where are we?" They thought they were in New York. Trust me, this is the truth. Many people do not have a sense of where Africa as a whole is traveling or where some countries in Africa are going. And I am only saying by 2021. This is something for Indian companies to take heed. The internet penetration, according to McKinsey, will triple by 2015. Just to give an idea, right now it's at about 22% in East Africa. Mobile subscription is, broadband subscription of course, is at about 20%. And households with internet connections right now is at about 12%. And I'm talking only about sub-Saharan Africa. And mobile cell phone subscriptions, however, are up at 80%. What does that tell us? That tells us something interesting. That we have the mobile tool in our pockets, as rightly pointed out, which Ralph and I did not have the chance when we were growing up, although he's much younger than me. And more interestingly, now is the chance for corporates to take hold of these figures to allow us the opportunity to validate how applications could be. And I've got lots of examples, but I will not bore you with those. But I would like to see these penetration figures go up, because we call it ICT emergence, but what does that really mean? That communications technologies are the single measure of the success of applications in ICT. The single measure. And that I think is critical. But what happens with it is something that might surprise you. That with our ability to communicate, we are actually educating people. That somebody in the rural sector with a simple mobile phone will have access to an amazing world and an amazing array of information. And that, I think, is extremely critical, and that, I think, is important. Because I believe, and I come from a very agricultural, agrarian family, so agriculture is very close to me, I use that as a personal example, that I believe that the socio-economic development processes start and should start with agriculture. Because if you had breakfast this morning, somebody grew the stuff that came to you. The sad truth is, agriculture around the world, whether it's the United States, whether it's Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, whether it's Romania, whether it's Poland, is taken for granted. And I've talked to agriculturists across the world. They are the most disrespected, if I may, people on the planet, although they allow us the energy to walk. And I believe that if we can explore those opportunities, we will be able to bridge the digital divide. Because largely when somebody talks about digital divide, they talk about the urban area. Nobody talks about the farmer who could use invasions of locusts, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, which are a challenge, or even in North Africa generally. Nobody talks about what fertilizer they should use, and so on and so forth. And I believe that exploitation must end, and I say that on a personal kind of note, and that I think is important. There's lots of research done on this, and I'm not going to engage that in any way. So to come to the crux of this thing, why strategy? You know? I'm a professor of strategy, but what I'm going to say might shock you. I don't believe strategy exists. I do not believe strategy exists. Ask an executive at Google, and I ask my brother this all the time. I say to him, what is your strategy for tomorrow? I'm not able to answer that question. But the one thing all my colleagues, including my brother, tell me is they're watching their competitor. It's the competitor that defines the strategy for the future. But I believe collaborators also can define strategy for the future. And I believe in joint ventures, we can have that collaboration. And I believe education then supports that wider sense of collaboration that I think is very, very important. That is why it's critical. And I think all of you have referred to that. In the judiciary, for example, in Uganda talks about prison service, for example, we'll talk about it in Uganda. And what's essentially important is that connectivity, that there has to be a national communications infrastructure that can be depended on. And I will give you an example. I lived in Iowa, a very agrarian state in the United States. I worked at the universities there. My responsibility in smart part with the governor of Iowa at the time was to develop a network that would allow only one thing: connect all of Iowa to televisions. This is 1986. Have we come a long way? Everybody called our governor at the time, who was Mr. Terry Branstad, who, by the way, is governor again. They called him Terry Brain Dead, because they did not understand the identity of infrastructure and its role in the community. Today, and for a long time, that network still makes money for the state of Iowa. Millions of it, because everybody's plugged into it. And it became very easy for the internet generation because of fiber optic cable, repeated every 20 miles north to south and 15 miles east to west. And it's provided an amazing array of technological infrastructure sophistication for the state of Iowa. And believe you me, it still works because optic fiber can stay as long as the fiber is in the ground. And that, I think, is an example that I want to work with. Everybody talks about the UN goals, and they have been mentioned quite a lot. You know, the question is, how do you strategize them? Having said I don't believe in strategy, I say, how do we strategize? to create a mandate to deliver those goals. And I believe collaboration and joint ventures will allow us to fundamentally do that. So how do you do it is a bigger question. To me, there has to be an agent to facilitate change. There has to be an agent to facilitate application. And I believe there has to be an agent to apply the use of technology step by step, as and when necessary, as and when needed, across different applications that we can talk about, whether it's application in the prison service, whether it's the application in the general wider legal remit, or whether it's in agriculture. It does not matter. And that, I think, is important. So I believe that government, private sector, and civil society, if you like, can come together to actually do that. I'll take only 2 more minutes, but let me tell you some examples of what's happening in Kenya, in Senegal, and in Malawi, and in Mali. In Kenya, Kilimo Salama is a scheme that provides crop insurance for farmers, using M-Pesa payment gateways, helping them to better manage natural hazards such as drought and excessive rainfall. And it's an amazing system which actually works. Climate change adaptation for Malawi is interesting because the whole challenge was deforestation. So training local communities to map their villages by giving them GPS devices, empowering them to develop localized adaptation strategies to engage communities. And this has also happened in India. The Indian focus on wildlife was only on wildlife, but not the people that lived in the parks. When the focus came to people living in the parks, the national parks became successful, and poachers became game wardens.
Yes.
And that's the thing that Africa is doing so effectively. The Kenya Wildlife Service, who I've had the privilege to be associated with informally, have created an amazing array of community engagement, because the elephant is a lovely animal, it's a revered animal, but it's a very powerful animal that can destroy the community's food supply for a whole year in under 20 seconds. It can eat a whole bunch of bananas in a hurry, and I've seen them do that. So how do you compensate these people? So Kenya Wildlife Service has an amazing rational relationship to do that. In financial services, for example, in Senegal, there's a company called Sonatel, which is a subsidiary of Orange, the French company, is one of the latest operators in the continent to launch a money transfer service that enabled 200,000 subscribers very quickly. Because word spreads, right? That if I can get money on the phone, then magically things happen, and I don't have to go to a bank. Any bankers in this place? I don't mean to offend you, but think about it. Health. I've been lucky enough to be associated with a company called Global Brigades. You may check them out. We work with medical schools, medical institutions, doctors, and other companies to actually get people to work within a social context and provide for medical care at the different associations around these countries. So what Healthcare in Malawi and telemedicine did with Orange essentially was they were able to bring specialists to rural areas. I know we talked about cybercrime and facilitating that, but here, specialists from rural areas, that they actually got workers and specialists together, trained them, and then took them apart and provided them some vital, care opportunities, and did that. That was quite, So where does the India-Africa collaboration happen, or where does India-Uganda, where does South Sudan, or other country collaboration happen? I believe it's infrastructure, very important. Creating infrastructure is key. Access and investments in strategic developments that countries could engage in. Because sadly, when one company becomes successful, the challenges, and my research tells me that the challenges are very simply that when one company becomes successful, they do not want to share that information across to other platforms. There's nothing wrong with that because it's corporate. But when a government invites companies to have partnerships and develop them, magic happens. Sadly, the best collaboration, and you'd be surprised, happens only with military hardware. It does not happen with technology. And this is a huge challenge for us. How do you overcome that? And that, I think, is critical. The other bit, of course, is policy. And we all have talked about policy in terms of legal systems and stuff, and Ralph is in a better position to probably talk about it, so are the colleagues. But importantly, supporting a transparent, inclusive policy process involving all stakeholders is perhaps critical as well, which will then lead to what I call human capacity building. And that, I think, is something, again, that is important, because that is very crucial in creating knowledge workers, that knowledge workers would then perpetuate to become managers, and obviously managerial capability will be increased. And that, I think, is important, and that is something important because it's easy to develop applications. Everybody has an app. On average, you'll have at least 20 apps on your phone. That's easy to do. How many of them do you use every day? I think WhatsApp perhaps is the only ones that you use. And this is a bigger challenge, because the others are irrelevant. They're for one day only. I mean, if you're British, the weather is important to you, so you would probably look at the weather app, right? When's the last time you looked at weather in Delhi? And that, I think, is important. So what are the possibilities? Sound ICT, socio-economic development policies need to be in place. And the necessary resource for that are human, financial, technological. And that, I think, is important. And that is something that we have to do. So my last comments are that in conclusion, I can say that we need a reliable, dependable, vibrant, and collaborative ICT sector that will contribute to growth. And I believe that companies in India and Africa are best poised to explore those synergies, which when managed appropriately, I believe, will provide rewarding opportunities to companies and citizens alike, taking that rural development that I talked about in place, along with urban renewal alongside that. And that, I think, is critical, and that is something that I would love to share. And I'll open the floor to other colleagues to talk more about some of these things. Thank you.